The Not So Perfect Pair by starcollectorsilas. Chapter 4. Chuuya's parents were not pleased by their son and his best friend walking in 5 minutes before school ended, but they were let off with a sigh and a "please stop skipping school." Both of Chuuya's sisters got in within the next hour, greeting Chuuya as he sat in the living room watching TV with Dazai. Koyo had arrived and told him to close his eyes, saying happy birthday, dropping new earrings and some money into his hands and disappearing before he could open them again, not wanting to be caught in Chuuya's inability to receive gifts normally. Kyoka had been slightly nicer about it, sticking around long enough to be hugged after giving Chuuya a brown rabbit plushie and a handmade card. Dazai had watched with amusement at the way Chuuya interacted with his siblings, feigning ignorance when Chuuya glared at him. By dinner time, the table had been laid with plates and pizza, a few balloons taped to the nearest wall, and a seat at the end of the table for Chuuya. It was rather dramatic, but a yearly tradition, and carried out at all the birthdays that happened in the Nakahara house. Chuuya had smiled until his face hurt, forgetting about all the stuff that happened at school, or about the soulmate predicament, or anything else that could have upset him. He said it every year, but he could swear it was his best birthday ever, eating pizza surrounded by his friends and his best friend. His parents had worked together for his gift, explaining that for his birthday, during the next holiday they had prepared for him to get a license for a motorbike. At that, Chuuya had nearly exploded from excitement, and he was riding that high all the way through the cake, and he only stopped smiling when he crashed face first into his bed, sighing tiredly. "God, that was amazing," he said, and Dazai laughed. Downstairs, he could still hear the rest of his family talking and joking. Dazai sat down next to him on the bed, and Chuuya sat up again. Dazai had a few gifts in his hands, and wordlessly held out the first gift. Chuuya took it, slightly cautious at the smirk Dazai was wearing. He shook it. It didn't make a sound. "What's in this?" he asked curiously, and Dazai's smirk just widened. "Open it and see." Chuuya opened it quickly, ripping the wrapping paper and instantly glaring at Dazai at the sight of the black fabric. "A collar?" he asked incredulously. "No, Chuuya! Why would you ever think that?" Dazai asked, eyes widening in mock disbelief. "It's a choker. There's a difference." Chuuya pulled it out, running it between his fingers. He had to admit, it was actually really nice, the smooth fabric feeling nice and cool against his skin. He admired it for a second, and then put it on, glaring at Dazai. "Don't think for 1 second that this is me playing into your stupid dog thing," he said, though without any real malice. Dazai just laughed. "Okay, just take the next one," he said, producing another present and pushing it into Chuuya's hands. Chuuya raised an eyebrow but opened it quickly, a metal tin falling out. He paused, confused. What the? He opened the tin to find a fountain pen, with ink in different colors and a small pad of paper to test the colors on. His jaw dropped as he carefully took out the pen, admiring the color. It was nothing particularly special, in a brownish red color with silver details. He looked at Dazai, carefully cradling the pen in his hands. "I know how much you like writing. I assumed you might like something fancy to write with." Chuuya just stared even more. He felt his face heat up, and he shook it off, clearing his throat. "You were right. Thanks," he said, feeling a little awkward about accepting the gift, and he put it back in the tin before carefully putting it on his bedside table. He turned back to Dazai to find another gift being pressed into his hands. "Really? How many gifts did you get me?" Chuuya asked, genuinely surprised. "Just those 3, Dazai said as Chuuya took the final gift. It was soft, the paper crinkling as the material inside gave way under his touch. He glanced at Dazai curiously before he ripped the paper off again, being more careful than previously. It opened into a black hoodie with red stitching. Instantly, Chuuya pulled off the jumper he was currently wearing and put the new one on, adjusting it to sit properly. It was a little big, falling over his hands and hanging loosely, but perfect. Dazai grabbed Chuuya's left hand and Chuuya's eyes widened until he was pointed to the embroidery on the cuff. It wasn't the neatest, but it was their names, Chuuya and Dazai, surrounded by a bunch of stars and golden thread. Chuuya probably had a staring problem. He just stared, his mouth falling open as he ran his eyes over the embroidered names again. He must be sick, given how warm he felt, and the way he felt his face go red. Without thinking, he used Dazai's hand in his to pull him forward, and threw his arms around Dazai, pressing his face into his chest. Dazai made a slight sound of surprise, but returned the sentiment easily, hugging Chuuya back just as tightly.
"Thank you,"
Chuuya said, voice muffled slightly by Dazai's chest as he closed his eyes tightly. Dazai laughed, and Chuuya could feel Dazai weaving his fingers through the ends of his hair, playing with it a little. "It's the least I could have done. Happy birthday, Chuuya," Dazai said, and Chuuya could hear Dazai's voice in his chest, and the rapid pace of his heart. He felt so happy, like nothing could go wrong. He clung to Dazai tightly as they sat in silence for a while, the most comfortable they could have possibly been in that moment. The silence was broken by Chuuya's mom coming upstairs. She barely blinked at the sight of the boys huddled together on the bed, used to it by now. "Dazai, your father is here for you." Chuuya instantly clocked the way Dazai stiffened up and his breathing stopped for a second. He pulled away, a little confused, but Dazai was smiling and got up when Chuuya did. "Oh, alright then," Dazai said as he grabbed his bag. He went to join Chuuya's mom in the hall, stopped to wave. "Bye, Chuuya. See you tomorrow," Dazai said cheerfully, and suddenly his bedroom door was closed. Chuuya sat, slightly confused and a little alarmed. He listened as Dazai chatted to his mom all the way down the stairs, and listened as the front door opened and closed as Dazai left. He was left, sitting on his bed in the hoodie Dazai had given him, still able to smell the strawberry shampoo Dazai used, and wrapping paper discarded on the floor. I think it's the first time since Oda left that Dazai had been picked up from here, he realized. He wasn't sure what to do with that realization. Still, he got up and cleaned the wrapping paper, putting his gifts away and retreating back to his bed. It was only just after 9 p.m., but he already had a good night message from Dazai. He quickly shot one back, then leaned back against the wall, chewing his nail. He caught himself moving his hands under his legs, and instead ended up chewing on his cheeks. The day had been interesting. From his soulmate Mark to Shirase to dinner with his family, it had been a roller coaster of emotions. Emotions he wasn't sure if he had the energy to shift through today. Something had shifted. He furrowed his eyebrows as he thought about it. He couldn't place it, but it was like he had noticed something, realized something, or whatever it was had become more obvious. He sighed and got up, heading down the stairs. His sisters were still awake, and by the sounds of things watching a movie. He was in a movie mood.
I tried.
Why? Why is it so difficult? Just because you don't like it. While your friend
Chapter 5.
and all the other guys had a reason or something you didn't like, do they? Or
Dazai lay in his bed. The room was dark and messy. The wall next to him was covered in glow-in-the-dark stars. But it had been so long since he left the curtains open that they wouldn't glow anymore. He ran his fingers over the cuts littering his arms, pressing into them, blinking numbly at the pain. Oda was getting worse. He was sick, very sick. Nobody would tell Dazai what he was sick with. He didn't need them in order to know that he wasn't going to get better. Now, Chuuya had blue lines all over his body, blue lines that matched his eyes, blue lines in the various shades of blue Dazai adored, blue lines mimicking the red ones all over Dazai. The last thing Dazai had been expecting that morning was to find that Chuuya was his soulmate. Well, there's still a chance he wasn't, and that someone else just so happened to cut exactly where he had. He likes Chuuya. Chuuya does not like him. Chuuya could never and should not ever like him. Plenty of people have soulmates and never marry them. Some people even hate them. Mori had a soulmate and looked blatantly disgusted when asked about it. Him and Chuuya should stay friends. He's not a good person to love. He shouldn't be loved. He was broken out of his thoughts by a crash downstairs, followed by crying. He threw himself out of bed and down the stairs, not even hesitating before stepping in front of the hand swinging to hit his sister. Elise cried out anyway, horrified at the familiar sight of Dazai being hit. A cup lay broken on the floor, and Dazai stared evenly at Mori before taking Elise and guiding her out of the room. He left Elise at the stairs before he returned to the kitchen and began to clean up the glass shards. Mori didn't even blink as he stared at the cuts over Dazai's arms. "Your stitches are getting better," he commented, and Dazai just dropped the glass pieces in the bin. "No thanks to you," Dazai said with a wide smile. Mori scoffed. "You can't hide Elise behind you forever. You need to learn how to look out for yourself. That's the only way you'll make it in this world." Dazai rolled his eyes. "According to you, the only way to make it in this world is also by sabotaging everyone else. I'll do what I want." Mori didn't say anything and let Dazai leave. He headed to Elise's room, finding her sitting on her bed with a blank expression. Dazai felt sick. She had learned that from him, most likely. "Are you okay?" she asked, and Dazai nodded. "I'm fine. It won't bruise, and I can cover it even if it would." He's slightly disappointed that it wasn't hard enough to bruise. Part of him wishes he had antagonized Mori more, taunted him into hitting harder. He deserves it. Though if he had hit hard enough to bruise, then Chuuya might have ended up with a mark. He wasn't sure how he felt about that idea. He tried rather hard to keep the physicalities of his family dynamics from Chuuya. It would make it harder to hide. "Maybe that's what you want," a traitorous part of his brain whispered. He ignored it. "Are you okay?" he asked, repeating Elise's question. She nodded. Dazai sighed and cast her one more glance before leaving. He didn't know how to help her. Not with this bit. Oda would have known. He closed his door and pulled open his drawer. He needed something a little more. We finally witnessed Dazai's home life. Trust me, things will get interesting from here. I decided to record 2 chapters this time since the second one was super short, and I might continue at this rate since it will help us go through the fic a lot faster. As always, be sure to show the original authors all the love you can, in this case starcollectorsilas. Also, big thanks to anyone who decides to show support through Ko-fi or Super Thanks. Hope you enjoyed listening, everyone. See you next time.